Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was rotten the moment I heard stilettos on polished linoleum. Too confident, too sharp, like someone who thought she was walking into her coronation. We were in the middle of our Monday strategy meeting, coffee still hot, budget sheets open, when the conference room door swung wide and enpranced little Miss Legacy Hire with a glittery iPad and a smirk that smelled like Sephora and delusion. Behind her, the VP himself, my boss's boss, beamed like he'd just brought in the second coming of Einstein in heels. "Everyone, meet Savannah," he said, gesturing like we were lucky to breathe her air. "She's our new head of innovation strategy." Head of innovation. The silence that followed was the kind of hush that only happens right before someone throws a punch or quits a job. Now, let me paint you a picture. I'd been in that chair for 20 years, built this department from a broom closet and a budget smaller than a school bake sale. I was the director of grants and innovation, principal investigator on every major research grant we'd landed in the last decade, and the unofficial translator of all the government red tape that kept our funding alive. My office was where proposals were born and budgets were massaged into submission. Savannah had a master's in global wellness leadership and exactly 1 year of experience interning at her daddy's friend's tech startup/yoga retreat. "You can't make this crap up." She waved like she was entering a sorority mixer and said, "Hey, team, just call me Savvy. I'll be streamlining things around here." Oh, and this part's burned into my memory like a bad tattoo. Going forward, Diane will be reporting to me. Kinda like my executive support. She laughed, loud, like the punchline was me. I didn't even blink. I stood up, calmly removed my badge, and placed it gently on the keyboard in front of her. Didn't say a word, didn't need to. Her eyes tracked it like I'd just handed her a live grenade, and to be fair, in a way, I had. Because here's the thing about being the backbone of a department. Once you walk out, the body collapses. Slowly, tragically, loud enough for the board to hear. But hey, before we keep going, let me ask you something. If you're enjoying this story, do me and the team that helps me tell it a small favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. I know, everyone says that. But seriously, it makes a difference. Otherwise, Savannah wins, and none of us want that. Back to the circus. I left my badge, my office, my framed certificate from the Department of Energy, left it all sitting there like a still life of stupidity, and walked out in a blaze of glory. No screaming or slamming doors, just a clean, surgical exit. The kind that makes people nervous because it's too quiet, like a storm pulling back before the tidal wave. I drove home with my windows down and my phone off. No dramatic playlist, just wind and silence. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the numbness started to crack, and what oozed out wasn't anger, it was something colder, calculated. I made a cup of tea, walked into my study, and opened the folder on my desktop labeled Grant Portal Final Docs. My name was all over it. Every signature, every metric, every quarterly compliance report, every budget adjustment. I was the PI, Principal Investigator, on a $200 million federal grant that wasn't just important. It was the lifeblood of the entire division. And Savannah, she didn't even know what a PI was. She thought she'd gotten a promotion. She actually got was an unlit fuse. I pulled up the digital confirmation form, scrolled to the bottom where my e-signature sat, tidy and blue. Then, with one slow click, I deleted it. Not the document, just the signature. The digital equivalent of removing the engine from a race car right before the big day. Then I saved the file to a thumb drive, ejected it with care, and slid it into the envelope where I kept my original employment contract. Marked up, highlighted, annotated with enough yellow post-its to make a canary nervous. I didn't feel righteous. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt efficient. That girl thought she'd made me her secretary. She just made herself the captain of a ship with no rudder, no map, and a hole below the waterline. And the iceberg, oh honey, it was coming. By Tuesday morning, the office smelled like lavender hand sanitizer and the slow death of logic. Savannah had claimed my desk, my actual desk, and filled it with pink stationery, a desktop diffuser, and a framed quote that said, "Slay every day." The only thing she'd slayed was institutional memory. The staff looked stunned, like deer wandering into traffic, but too polite to scream. Our senior researcher, Kent, who's been here since Bush-era fax machines, tried to offer her the briefing folder I always gave on Tuesday strategy calls. She blinked at it like it was written in Klingon and said, "No, I like to keep things more vibes-based." Then she deleted the calendar invite. She started by renaming every project file in the shared drive, taking out all the standardized grant codes we used to pass audits, replacing them with things like Savvy's Cool Pilot and Big Idea #2. No version control, no metadata, just a chaotic glitter bomb of incompetence. Our finance liaison emailed her a compliance checklist. She replied, moving away from checklists and more toward intention. The liaison thought it was a joke. It wasn't. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my dining room table, where I'd laid out my resignation contract, a flash drive, and 3 sticky notes: documents to delete, documents to keep, and documents to weaponize. I wasn't angry in the traditional sense. Anger is hot and stupid. This was cooler, like handling dry ice. You don't scream, just know how to use it. I booted up my personal laptop and opened the grant portal final docs folder. Everything was there. The funding application, the quarterly reporting schema, the letters of commitment from external partners. My name signed at the bottom of each section like a spine holding the whole thing upright. One click at a time, I backed it all up, clean, encrypted, time-stamped. Then I opened the submission confirmation. Blue e-signature at the bottom. Diane W., Principal Investigator. Still active. I hovered over it for a moment. Then hit delete. The signature vanished. The file saved. The system would now flag the grant as incomplete. The automated review team wouldn't process it further until a new PI signed, and not just any warm body. It had to be someone with credentials, federal background clearance, and a confirmed history of compliance oversight. Savannah didn't qualify to check out a library book under my name, let alone replace it on a $200 million federal grant. Still sipping lukewarm tea, I slid the flash drive into a padded envelope and wrote one word on it in marker: insurance. Upstairs, in the guest room turned home office, I pulled open the top drawer and pulled out a 3-ring binder, my original employment agreement, complete with non-compete clauses, carve-outs, one very specific amendment added 3 years ago after our last acquisition scare. Principal investigators retain individual data rights for compliance submission in the event of role dissolution or departmental redundancy. Legalese for, if they fire me, I keep the keys to the kingdom. Meanwhile, back at the office, Savannah had initiated what she called a rebranding sprint. That meant purging decades of file names and tag structure because it made her brain hurt. She flagged archived folder names as too sterile and changed our internal Slack group to Innovation Nation. I heard about it from Clara, our program coordinator, who called me whispering from the ladies' room like she was reporting from behind enemy lines. She just told a tenured researcher to stop using academic language in the evaluation metrics. She whispered. She renamed the federal matching funds tracker to Grantish things. Grantish, I said, already opening a bottle of wine. She said it's more playful like juggling chainsaws. The sad part, no one said a word, not to her, not to the VP. Fear moves fast in bureaucracies. They'd seen what happened to me. A career woman with 2 decades of wins, erased in a breath by someone whose qualifications included liking her own LinkedIn posts. So they stayed quiet, watched their calendars disappear, their budgets get renamed, and their organizational structure dissolve like cotton candy in toilet water. But me, I wasn't done, not even close. I hadn't screamed when they shoved me out. I hadn't written a dramatic farewell email. I hadn't even logged a complaint with HR. Because you don't fight a toddler with a stick. You build a playground somewhere else and take all the parents with you. I'd already gotten 2 emails from former grant partners asking what had happened. I replied with a single sentence: you'll want to reach out to the new leadership. And I knew that the moment those partners tried to get anything approved, any addendum filed, any compliance form submitted, they'd hit a brick wall. Because Savannah didn't just inherit a title. She inherited a structure she didn't understand. And I just pulled the rebar out of the foundation. Email landed at 8:12 a.m. sharp. Subject line: PI confirmation required final compliance checkpoint urgent. It came from the Federal Grant Oversight Committee, a group so dry and bureaucratic that if they were a condiment, they'd be unflavored oatmeal. But their inboxes controlled $200 million, so dry or not. When they emailed, people usually responded like the building was on fire. Except this time. Fire marshal was a girl who didn't know what matches were. Savannah opened the email with her usual "I got this" swagger and immediately forwarded it to herself from the General Grants inbox. She didn't ask anyone about it, didn't ping the legal team, didn't loop in finance. She just typed a reply that started with, "Hi there. I'm overseeing this project now as Director of Innovation Strategy." Smiley face included. She clicked the link asking for PI credential confirmation. That's where the wheels came off. The portal kicked her out. Instantly. Red letters flashing. Access denied, no registered PI credentials on file. She tried again, thinking maybe she used the wrong email. Locked out. Then she tried copying the confirmation link into a Word doc to see if she could reword it as a PDF. As if grant compliance worked like Canva. The portal didn't care. The system was a federal one, designed to flag exactly this kind of nonsense. Every login was two-factor authenticated. Every signature had a unique digital trail tied to a government ID. Every action timestamped and logged. You couldn't just send it from your account. Especially not if your account didn't exist. So she did what all nepotism hires eventually do when faced with real-world accountability. She panicked. She stomped into her dad's office in those ridiculous ankle boots and said, "I need you to fix this. The grant people are asking for some signature, and it's like, not letting me." The VP, halfway through his second Diet Coke and nursing a mild hangover from his buddy's whiskey tasting the night before, didn't even look up. "Just send it from your email," he grunted. "You're in charge now." "But it says I'm not the PI," he sighed. "What even is a PI? I don't know." Snapped, "But it sounds like one of those forms Diane used to sign." That's when something shifted in the room, because deep down the VP knew. He wouldn't admit it aloud, but he felt the tremor. Something in his gut tensed like a dog hearing thunder before the sky cracks. But pride is a hell of a drug, and he wasn't about to let the board, or worse, Diane, know his daughter had stepped into a puddle the size of the Grand Canyon. "Just respond. It'll work itself out," he said. So she did. She replied to the committee with a bubbly email and attached a PDF of her business card. As if that could substitute for federal compliance. She clicked send. And across the country, in a cubicle inside the Committee for Institutional Oversight, a 56-year-old career administrator named Ruth inhaled sharply through her nose and said aloud, "Oh, hell no." Ruth, whose entire job was tracking digital signature integrity and confirming that the person listed as Principal Investigator had the actual legal right to accept or deploy taxpayer funds, didn't laugh. She didn't scold. She simply flagged the response, marked the portal account as under investigation, and submitted a lock notice to the disbursement system. By 10:30 a.m., the grant status was changed to compliance hold awaiting verified PI. Back at HQ, Savannah got an automated email saying the portal was locked and further correspondence must go through legal. She forwarded it to her father again. Subject, "Ugh, can you just call them?" And that's when the first whisper went out. Clara messaged Kent, "Have you seen the grant update? The portal's locked." Kent replied, "Why would they need a PI confirmation if we submitted that weeks ago?" The finance liaison, normally allergic to gossip, emailed HR. "Do we know who's listed as PI on the DOE grant?" Just double-checking, within 2 hours, the leadership Slack channel, usually silent unless someone's birthday was involved, was lighting up with confused questions. Was Diane removed from the grant formally? Did we assign a new PI through legal? Is Savannah cleared for credentialed compliance? Savannah, oblivious, was in the break room trying to crowdsource a new team vision slogan from an intern who still thought she was a marketing coordinator. She never saw the wave coming. But the building had started to tilt. Not with a bang, but with a question. Who, exactly, was the principal investigator? And more importantly, where the hell was she? At precisely 11:42 a.m., official status on the Department of Energy grant portal changed from pending final PI confirmation to account locked awaiting clarification from registered authority. No fireworks, no blinking alert sirens, just 6 bland words that detonated like a nuclear bomb in the finance wing. Within 10 minutes, 3 budget analysts were digging through spreadsheets like they were trying to defuse a bomb. Because this wasn't just any grant. This was the spine of next quarter's entire operating forecast. The money was already counted. The salaries already allocated. The contractors already promised deliverables that hadn't even been scoped yet. When they punched the numbers again, the cold truth landed. Without that grant, the department was underwater by tens of millions. And just like that, the whispers turned into a storm. Check if Diane signed her termination papers. Did she ever submit a formal resignation? Where's her contract? Does legal still have it? HR, usually staffed by 2 interns and a tired woman named Linda who'd been mentally retired since 2015, scrambled into motion. They started rifling through digital employee records, only to discover that Diane's departure hadn't gone through the formal exit checklist. No offboarding, no NDA reissuance, no compliance flag, just one badge left on a desk, and a ghost in the system who still had every credential that mattered. Meanwhile, I was sitting in front of my laptop at home, wearing sweatpants and sipping a cappuccino from a mug that said, "World's okayest director." The sunlight hit the back wall of my home office just right as I clicked into my Zoom call with a nonprofit accelerator out of Denver. People who had been emailing me on and off for the past 6 months with phrases like restructure for impact and launch a think tank with full autonomy. They'd read my white papers, sat in on 2 of my panel talks. They knew what I'd built. And unlike Savannah, they understood what it meant to lead innovation without screaming girl boss every 6 seconds. "Diane," said the woman on the other end, "if you're open to relocating or even just consulting, I'd like to revisit the discussion about launching an applied research hub. The one you scoped last year? We've got backers now." Major ones, I smiled, not wide, not smug, just calm, like the sound of a door clicking shut on the last room in a house I never planned to visit again. "I'm listening." Back at HQ, chaos was building in careful, quiet layers. Legal started cross-checking who had the authority to appoint a new PI. Turns out, no one did, not without written confirmation from the outgoing one. Which, surprise, didn't exist. Because I'd never been fired. I'd never resigned. I just walked away from the wreckage, slow and deliberate, like a surgeon exiting a failed operating room knowing full well they took the patient's pulse with them. Someone in payroll made the mistake of asking aloud, "So, are we still paying her?" Someone in PR muttered, "Wait, we told 3 partners this grant was secured." Someone in the boardroom asked the most dangerous question of all. What happens if she doesn't come back? The answer? No one had a clue. Savannah, for her part, was melting down in silence. Her Slack DMs were full of urgent messages she didn't understand. Acronyms she couldn't Google fast enough. Staff asking questions she didn't have answers to. She tried calling the DOE grant line, only to be told, politely, but firmly, that due to data access restrictions, it couldn't confirm or deny any account activity with non-authorized individuals. She hung up and said to the office, "Whatever, I'll just reset the password." She couldn't, because you can't reset what you were never invited into. In that moment, she realized something terrifying. The money wasn't just frozen. It was gone. It belonged to a portal she couldn't open, tied to credentials she didn't possess, tracked by a federal agency that didn't care how many sparkly blazers she owned. And somewhere across town, I was closing my laptop, the nonprofit accelerator smiling back at me, saying they'd send over preliminary terms by Friday. I didn't need vengeance. They gave it to me. All I had to do was step aside and let the cracks spread. Let them realize what it means when you replace the architect with a tourist who thinks a blueprint is just a coloring book. Building hadn't fallen yet, but the foundation, it was already dust. At 9:47 p.m., long after most of the office lights had dimmed and the janitorial staff were vacuuming around cubicles full of energy drink cans and broken dreams, the VP slammed his fist on the conference room table so hard a Keurig pod rolled off and hit the floor like a spent bullet. Half the leadership team had been summoned with less than an hour's notice. Word's urgent compliance review had been scrawled into their calendars like a bad omen. "Why," he barked, voice already fraying at the edges, "is this not resolved yet?" Everyone looked at each other, doing that slow corporate shuffle where no one wants to speak first, in case it means they'll get fired, demoted, or forcibly reassigned to the office of sad emails. Finally, the director of finance cleared her throat and spoke. "We've contacted the Department of Energy twice. Won't release any details without confirmation from the registered PI. Then get her to confirm it," he snapped. "Another voice, sir. She's not returning our emails." "She didn't resign," someone added, "at least not formally. We checked HR. There's no processed exit. Technically, she's still active in the system." That's when the room fell into the kind of silence you can actually hear. The lights buzzed. A printer somewhere spat out an unclaimed spreadsheet. Savannah, seated near the door in a pale pink blazer 2 sizes too ambitious, was chewing on the end of a pen like it held answers. Finally, she piped up with a shrug that could have bankrupted a city. "I mean, I thought the PI thing was just like a title, like project lead or something. We could just change it, right? The VP turned his head toward her so slowly it looked like his neck was cracking under the weight of the moment. Please, he said, each word ground out like gravel under a tire. Tell me you didn't fire the principal investigator on a $200 million federal grant without replacing her or checking if it was just a title. Savannah blinked, looked around, and let out a nervous little laugh. Well, she kind of fired herself, didn't she? I mean, she just walked out. From the back of the room, someone muttered, yeah, and took the entire grant pipeline with her. Eagle had already started dragging out the compliance logs. The lead counsel, an overworked man who hadn't taken PTO since Obama was in office, held up a stack of printed PDFs, red ink bleeding through the margins like a wound. Her last login was the night she left, he said flatly. She accessed the confirmation page, then removed her digital signature. After that, nothing. No final submission. No PI reassignment. The system auto-locked after the signature deletion. Standard protocol. So it's still her account, the VP said, and we can't touch it, legal replied. Savannah raised her hand like she was in high school civics class. Can't we, just call someone and explain? Explain what? The VP snapped, his voice climbing. That you guessed what a federally protected title meant. You assumed the entire future of this department was a Google Doc we could just make a copy of. His face had gone a shade of red usually reserved for malfunctioning boilers. She opened her mouth again, closed it. Legal continued, this time almost apologetically. Also, we checked the amendment on her original contract. There's a clause, added 3 years ago, giving her data rights to all submitted compliance frameworks in the event of role redundancy. It wasn't redundant, the VP hissed. Doesn't matter. We made her redundant the moment we told her to report to Savannah. She didn't push back, she didn't argue, she just walked. But she walked without relinquishing any rights. There's no exit paperwork, no NDA refresh, no reassignment authorization, no revocation of system-level privileges. Finance spoke up again, voice trembling now. Sir, I don't think we can salvage this. VP stared at the wall behind them, where someone had forgotten to take down last quarter's pie chart projections. A neat, hopeful slice labeled DOE grant. Q3 expansion $200M plus forecast beamed back at him like a cruel joke. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. In that moment, every person in that room finally understood what they'd done. Not just to her, but to themselves. Made a gamble that experience could be replaced with ego. And now they were bankrupt. Not just in dollars, in credibility, in leadership, in options, and Diane? She wasn't picking up the phone. At 7:16 a.m., Legal got the call they'd been praying for and dreading in equal measure. The line was so quiet at first that the paralegal thought it was a wrong number. Then came the voice, calm, professional, detached like an ice cube clinking against a highball glass. This is Diane W. I'm calling to formally close my personnel file. The junior associate nearly dropped her phone. She put the call on hold and sprinted to the head of legal, mouthing it's her, like she was announcing a ghost sighting. When the head of legal got on the line, Diane didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'll sign the formal resignation today, she said, cool and composed. But I'd like one clause voided first. Name it, he said, already pulling up her file. My non-compete. Silence. Then the sound of rapid typing. He knew exactly what it meant, they all did. If she walked and kept that clause intact, they had at least some leverage, a way to slow her down, block her from taking sensitive framework work to competitors. But if they let her go free, she could nuke them from orbit. We'll remove it, he said without even pretending to negotiate. I'll expect an amended release by noon, she replied. Digital signature. Time-stamped. Then she hung up, no threats, no gloating, no smug remarks, just business. That was always the part that terrified them the most, her composure. She never raised her voice, never flailed, never gave them the satisfaction of seeing the cracks. And now they were the ones scrambling to slap together legal bandages while she plotted her next empire in silence. By noon, the signed document was in their inbox. Non-compete voided, NDA terms untouched, but practically unenforceable without funding or internal credibility. HR closed the file and marked her as voluntary departure. The system logged the final event with a soft digital chime. And then, at 1:03 p.m., a ripple hit LinkedIn. A single, unassuming post. Thrilled to announce, I've joined the Center for Policy Innovation as Chief Research Strategist, honored to work alongside a team committed to evidence-based impact and ethical grant stewardship. A calm headshot, neutral lighting, no fireworks, just clarity. The comments filled in seconds. What a win for them. Massive hire. Did not see this coming. But the real bloodletting happened off the screen. Because the Center for Policy Innovation wasn't just a competitor. It was the competitor. The one their own board had warned about during last year's strategic planning retreat. One that had started siphoning off talent from major institutions by offering autonomy, funding, and a total ban on nepotism-based leadership. And now she was their chief strategist. Not a consultant, not an adjunct, chief. Somewhere in a very expensive office, the VP read the update while sweating through his dress shirt. He hit like by accident, then immediately unliked it and closed the tab like it had teeth. His daughter. She stormed into his office holding her phone and hissing, "Did you know she was talking to them?" No, he didn't, but he should have. Because here's the truth they never understood. People like Diane don't walk out of institutions they've spent decades building unless they've already laid bricks somewhere else. You don't abandon your life's work for nothing. You relocate it, you protect it, you make damn sure it ends up in better hands. The center didn't need to poach her. Been quietly feeding them insights, frameworks, and early-stage models for months. Not proprietary, not stolen, just foundational thinking. Things she did on weekends. Ideas that Savannah never had time to ask about because she was too busy turning compliance dashboards into color-coded vibe boards. While HQ spiraled, Diane was onboarding, setting up her access keys, being greeted by a real team, one that asked for her input without interrupting, one that didn't treat her like a relic with good handwriting. Her office at the new center? Smaller, quieter. But the view overlooked a research park funded by a grant model she helped pioneer. That wasn't revenge, it was relocation. Strategic, surgical, done without raising her voice. Because sometimes the coldest moves don't scream. They whisper, "I'm not yours anymore." The memo hit inboxes just before dawn, and by 8 a.m. was circulating like gossip at a family funeral. The subject line was harmless enough. Grant Reallocation Notice Center for Policy Innovation. But the second paragraph punched through the corporate skull with the grace of a wrecking ball. Following PI withdrawal and the absence of a qualified reassignment, federal funding, originally earmarked for your institution, has been redirected to the newly submitted continuation request, led by Diane W., now appointed Chief Research Strategist at the Center for Policy Innovation. Translation: the money was gone, not frozen, not paused, gone. The rival institution had acted fast, swooping in with a fully compliant continuation proposal, all metrics aligned, partnerships preserved, budget reviewed, compliance logs pristine. Because Diane had built them that way. Not by stealing, by remembering. Her brain was the archive. The relationships, the technical specs, logic trees of every submission. She hadn't taken files. She'd taken ownership. And now, the Department of Energy had rubber-stamped it. The $200 million was on its way to them. The dominoes started falling within the hour. Kent submitted his resignation first. The research coordinator followed before lunch. By mid-afternoon, Clara sent a reply-all farewell email, so passive-aggressive it should have come with a restraining order. Grateful for all the time I spent here. Hope future leadership learns to read a compliance clause before renaming federal line items $5. No one even tried to stop the bleeding. They were too busy trying to cauterize the gaping hole in their credibility. But the real implosion came when Savannah, still clinging to her last delusions of relevance, made the mistake of posting a clarifying statement on the company's official LinkedIn page. It was a pastel Canva nightmare with her headshot in the corner, complete with soft gradients and bold Helvetica text. While we're saddened to see the DOE grant reallocated, we're proud of the groundwork our innovation team laid. As the strategic lead on this project's early momentum, I remain hopeful for future collaborations. Underneath, she signed it, Savannah L., Director of Innovation Strategy / Acting Principal Liaison. It took exactly 34 minutes for the Department of Energy to issue a response. They didn't at her. They didn't call her. They didn't even send a cease and desist. They posted a formal statement in the comments, as cold and clean as surgical steel. To clarify, the individual referenced was not, and has never been, registered as Principal Investigator or a designated compliance officer on this grant. Misrepresentation of credentials on federally monitored funding may carry legal consequences. The comment got 2,000 likes in an hour. Someone screenshot it and added the caption, "Girl boss too close to the sun." Another user chimed in, "From PI to PR disaster in one fiscal quarter." It was over, not just the funding, the illusion, the brand. The nepotistic power play wrapped in acrylic nails and unearned confidence crumbled on contact with federal fact-checking. Inside HQ, the phones stopped ringing. Vendors began pulling out of tentative partnerships. A university in Michigan publicly withdrew from their upcoming joint study, citing administrative instability. Even the building itself seemed to take on a different tone, quieter, heavier, like it knew it was being slowly evacuated of its purpose. And Diane, she didn't gloat. She didn't repost. She didn't comment. Just moved her calendar appointment for the Federal Review Panel from pending to confirmed. Her new office at the center had a potted plant she hadn't killed yet, a mug that didn't say anything ironic, and a team that waited for her to finish a sentence before speaking. And the grant, it was already funding pilot programs. Research assistants were being hired. Partnerships were stabilizing. The money hadn't just been reallocated. It had been rescued. The institution that thought it could replace 20 years of expertise with a marketing slogan, they weren't just bleeding funds. They were a national punchline. And somewhere on the internet, Savannah was quietly updating her profile, changing her title from Director of Innovation Strategy to Open to Work. The boardroom stank of citrus cleaner and desperation. Emergency session. 10 a.m. sharp. No pastries, no coffee, no smiles. Just a line of stiff chairs, other folders snapped open like bear traps, and the thud of heavy shoes as directors filed in one by one, each face more thunderstruck than the last. No small talk, no backslaps, just questions sharpened like scalpels. The VP sat at the head of the table, jaw clenched, tie pulled too tight, sweat blossoming at the collar like guilt made visible. A director with silver hair and a voice like a chainsaw turned on him first. "Walk us through how," he said, not asked. $200 million federal grant was compromised because your daughter thought Principal Investigator was decorative. The VP opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Another board member, a woman who once ran compliance at a major think tank, pushed her glasses up and slid a document across the table. Savannah submitted a public statement claiming she led this grant. DOE corrected her, publicly. That screenshot has been shared over 5,000 times. Someone else chimed in. "We've lost 3 major partnerships in 48 hours. Our unrestricted funding pool is in free fall. Donors are calling, furious. And your response," the chair of the board said slowly, "was to tell everyone it would blow over." The VP's mouth finally moved. "I thought that was your mistake," the chair snapped. "You thought. You didn't check." The table went quiet again. Then came the quiet execution. Effective immediately, Savannah was to be removed from any and all leadership roles. No management titles. No visibility. Her badge would still work for now, but her inbox was to be redirected. Any internal announcement would state role transition due to organizational realignment. They didn't even give her the dignity of saying she resigned. They scrubbed her like a bad PR photo. Next came the budget revisions. The entire innovation division was gutted. Staff were to be reassigned, terminated, or moved under compliance. Offices consolidated. Travel frozen. Any remaining funds from minor grants were to be redirected into legal contingency. The VP tried to protest. "We'll lose everyone." "You already have," the silver-haired director said. "You just didn't notice until it was printed in Forbes." Across town, I was at a small cafe with high ceilings and no Wi-Fi. Just the way I liked it. I was reviewing a policy draft for the center when my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I ignored it. It buzzed again, this time a message. "Diane, quiet inquiry. Would you be open to discussing the formation of an independent foundation? Funding confirmed. Structure flexible. You'd lead. Let's talk." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I set the phone down and looked out the window, watched a pigeon strut like it owned the sidewalk. Somewhere between absurd and regal. I didn't smile, not really, because this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. All I'd ever wanted was control of my work, to do the thing I was good at without being undermined by office politics and insecure middle managers trying to build empires out of LinkedIn quotes and favoritism. I hadn't burned bridges. I hadn't shouted. I'd just left. And in doing so, I'd taken the air out of their lungs. The foundation offer came from one of our oldest partners, a woman I'd worked with during a 2016 grant cycle in New Orleans, someone who remembered the long nights we spent elbow deep in data and red tape. She remembered who did the work. They all did. Because when the dust settles, people don't ask who wore the blazer. They ask who built the damn building. I opened a new email draft, typed 6 words, happy to discuss. When and where, and just like that, a new beginning unfurled, not as a reaction to their failure, but as a continuation of my own blueprint. No permission needed, no gatekeepers, just a blank page and a pen in my hand. Let them restructure. I was already building again. The string quartet played something light and self-important, the kind of classical background noise that made donors loosen their ties and wealthy alumni feel cultured. Inside the university's new West Pavilion, floor-ceiling windows framed a soft autumn sunset, while waiters in black aprons floated between clusters of laughing faculty and foundation heads, their trays clinking with flutes of champagne and jargon. A mahogany stage stood at the front, flanked by 2 projectors looping a sleek video montage. Slow pans of research labs, children in rural classrooms, clean water projects, policy briefs being signed in far-off capitals, all led to one banner suspended in silver serif font over the screen. Center for Applied Impact Inaugural Gala. The crowd hushed as the host took the mic. Tonight, we celebrate not just a building, but a promise, a model of what research can be when it's given real purpose, real autonomy, and real leadership. There was a pause, then a smile. And so, it's my honor to introduce the founding director. A woman whose work redefined public grant frameworks, whose vision has already shaped our next decade, and whose name many of you already know, not because it was shouted, but because it endured. Applause swelled, not thunderous, but solid, earned, the kind that traveled straight through the bones of those who'd been there from the start. Diane stepped onto the stage in a black dress as understated as the plaque behind her. No sparkle, no shoulder pads, no PR flourish, just poise, composure. A quiet readiness. She didn't wave, just nodded once and took her place at the podium, letting the room breathe around her. "Thank you," she began. "This isn't about disruption. It's about design. It's about what happens when we build the right thing in the right way and protect it from the wrong hands." In the back of the room, by the second catering station, Kent leaned over to Clara and whispered, "That's what happens when you try to make the architect your secretary." Clara didn't laugh. She just smiled and sipped her drink, eyes fixed on the stage like she was watching a cathedral be rebuilt from memory. Back at the podium, Diane finished her short speech. Not a mission statement, not a performance. Just a truth. We didn't steal this grant. We preserved it. And we intend to earn every dollar, every partner, and every ounce of impact it delivers. She stepped away. The crowd rose, not all at once, but steadily, like a tide pulling itself upward. Later, as the room relaxed back into small talk and slow dancing, she stood near the back wall, alone for a moment, holding a glass of champagne in one hand and the evening program in the other. Her eyes flicked upward, toward the bronze plaque mounted beside the donor wall. It was simple, elegant. Center for Applied Impact, Founding Director, Diane W., Principal Investigator, Federal Grant, #249FQ3. There it was. No titles assigned, no asterisks. Just the role that had started everything and the name of the person who had refused to surrender it. Behind her, someone tried to introduce a tech investor. She nodded politely, then turned back to the plaque, watched the candlelight catch the etching. She wasn't anyone's assistant. She wasn't a cautionary tale. She was the blueprint. And for the first time in months, her glass didn't tremble in her hand. She raised it quietly to her lips, smiled without teeth, and took a slow sip. Legacy wasn't about loud exits. It was about where the map leads after you leave the room. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.